So in this session, we want to talk about agricultural communication and primarily touching upon the concepts of agricultural communication, why it is essential within development communication sector to be given some sort of priority. What is agricultural communication? Agricultural communication is a field that focuses on communication about agriculture related information among agricultural stakeholders and between agriculture and non-agricultural stakeholders. So primarily agricultural stakeholders are the ones who engage in agricultural activity, and agricultural non-stakeholders are the ones who could be consumers or who could be facilitators of the agricultural process. Agriculture is broadly defined in this discipline to include not only farming but also food, fiber, that is example would be cotton, animals, rural issues, and natural resources. So these are broadly um, the areas agricultural communication focuses on, not just agriculture. Agricultural communication is done formally and informally by agricultural extension and is considered related to science communication. What is agricultural extension? The process when those people who are the non-agricultural stakeholders and experts in the field so offer their extended support to primary stakeholders, then in that case, we can call the process to be agricultural extension. This is facilitated with um, technological help. By definition, agricultural communicators are science communicators. So they have studied agricultural science or they have studied communication and have a deep interest in looking at the sector as a career. So primarily science communicators develop as agricultural communicators when they have some sort of interest or the other in agricom. What do they do? The science communicators deal exclusively with the diverse applied science and business that is agriculture. Okay, so looking at the applied scientific process of agriculture, science communicators engage in agricom. An agricultural communicator is expected to bring with him or her a level of specialized experience or knowledge in agricultural field that is typically not required of the mass communicator. So this would be a differentiating factor between a regular mass communicator who engages in other forms of media and an agricultural communicator, because they bring in their expertise or experience in science com to kind of elevate the experience or the field in which other people are working as far as agricom is concerned. Agricultural communication also addresses all subject areas related to the complex enterprises of food, feed, fiber, renewable energy, natural resource management, rural development, and others locally to globally. So it's not something which could be considered as just a local phenomenon. Agricultural communication has been very active in the last 60 odd years across the world, and these are the subject areas that it addresses. So it doesn't just talk about the cultivation aspect of agriculture. So there is um, renewable energy, there is natural resource management, rural development. These are the other core areas agricultural communication also considers within its ambit. Furthermore, it spans all participants from scientists to consumers and all stages of those enterprises from agricultural research and production to processing, marketing, consumption, nutrition, and health. Like I told earlier, so the participants are not just the food producers, it's also us as the consumers who need to be in that space of constant dialogue with the uh, primary stakeholders, and it spans across areas from agricultural research. How do we facilitate better agricultural yield or production, to the processing, marketing, consumption, policy level research, uh, and also discussion about nutrition and health, because that's how we can grow this area, we can help evolve this area. The academic field originated from communication courses that taught students in the agricultural sciences how to communicate. Okay, so there are two aspects or two areas to it, try and understand. One is you need to have the technical know-how or the knowledge of mass communication or mass media sciences. And then you need to study agricultural sciences to become an agricultural communicator or to engage in agricultural communication. Now, you need not have extreme theoretical knowledge, but sound practical experience or field experience from the agricultural sector would help you to help communicate your ideas as an agricultural communicator. Originally, agriculture journalists were needed to report farm news for a much larger agricultural and rural audience. That's the beginning or the origin of how agricultural communication started taking shape. Um, there are a handful of agricultural journalists deployed by different media organizations, especially the press and the radio, to go and cover stories related to agriculture and the agrarian economy, and largely stories are related to the farms. And the target audience was primarily those people who live in the villages, or people who are considered to be the largest stakeholders in the agricultural sector. As people move from the farm to cities and suburbs, a much greater proportion of the population had less direct knowledge and experience regarding agriculture. And it's something that is extremely visible and critical situation has come out of it because of migration for better opportunities in the cities. Um, our parents or their parents left the villages from wherever they came from, and we moved from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy to now a technocratic economy. What has happened because of this gradual shifts is as the primary consumers of food, we don't know where it is coming from. If we talk about the food and clothes that we use on day-to-day life, our understanding or the knowledge about how food is grown is relatively less, because we consume direct from the market. We don't consume from the field, unlike our grandparents or their parents. So the city-bred people have less contact or less direct knowledge or experience regarding agricultural production, processing, all those things. That's why we tend to less relate to the farming community or the issues, and that has become a crisis situation for all of us, because tomorrow what happens is, tomorrow the kind of crisis, the farm crisis that is going on, agricultural crisis that is going on in the country, that the farmers are committing suicides in huge numbers, and now there is an ongoing protest in the north because of the laws that were passed on by the government, which are anti-people in nature, which is what they consider. So our intervention in policy level discussions, our intervention in any kind of critical argumentative framework is relatively less, because we tend to care less. We position ourselves in a rather safe zone where we assume that we'll have food forever if we because we earn money and we have money to buy food. But the point is, you can only buy food till the food is there in the market. Once it goes off the grid, once the farmers stop producing, then who is going to provide food? Well, the market buy the food from that you consume or you in turn buy. So, and this is almost playing in this loop of the indifference that we have towards the farming community, and we our lack of knowledge or our lack of interest in knowing more about agriculture or processes and issues or challenges regarding agriculture. Why is agricom so important, or why what is the significance of agricultural communication in rural development or in development communication, so to say? It is needless to repeat the fact that India is a country where agriculture plays a major role in our economy, and something that has we have been experiencing since time immemorial, that we had primarily been um, an agrarian economy, and then it's only in the last um, few decades that we have moved swiftly from being an agrarian economy to an industrial economy, and now since the late 90s we are graduating to a phase of being called as a technocratic economy. Traditionally, we are an agriculture-based economy, like I told you. And the share of agriculture in our economy has gone down considerably because people have moved from that phase of living in the villages and growing their own food and consuming to uh, the search or looking for better opportunities in smaller towns or cities or tier two cities and the metros, so on and so forth. So what has happened is all these places are landlocked, and there are less farming lands, and there are other kind of jobs which are relatively lucrative, and the farming community doesn't hold on to the activities that they did for such a long period of time for survival and sustenance. Instead, then they are sending the next generation to cities and towns to educate themselves and find better jobs or better work opportunities, which will elevate the standard of living, which will elevate the living conditions of these families who have been largely downtrodden for the longest period of time, because the traditional occupation of agriculture is kind of diminishing, and it's not making sense for farmers to offer the same fate that they or their parents have had uh, in the history. So because agriculture is becoming less of a lucrative business or occupation, the current generation or the generations that are going to come are not going to pay attention to agriculture production or activities related to agriculture. So this is where that gap which is constantly coming up, in this process, is something to be addressed by agricultural communicators, and this is largely why we need agricom to to be placed in the center of development communication. Here are the few characteristics which have kept it at an important and prime position in the Indian economic sector. Why agriculture agricom is important? What do they include? They include these points. It is still the largest sector of employment and also disguised employment. What is the disguised employment? Because a lot of people um, do engage in agricultural activities, but we don't call them farmers. We don't know our farmers. Like Sainath was speaking in the last conference session that we saw the other day. We don't know our farmers. We don't know which part of the farming community people belong to and what kind of products they grow, whether they grow food crops or cash crops. We all studied a bit of it in our geography classes in school, and that's long forgotten. So, but when we kind of gather data or we look at the statistics, uh, agricultural employment is still the largest employment sector. It is still based on old and not very productive techniques of production, with advanced cultivation happening only in case of marginal percentage of farmers. And which farmers we are talking about? We are talking about farmers who are rich. We are talking about farmers who don't farm anymore, but they have lent their lands to agricultural tillers or co-producers to farm their lands. So, and because they have the wherewithal or the money or the know-how to, engage in advanced cultivation techniques, uh, they try to use them, which obviously leads to better productive values. But when we look at the numbers of those farmers, it's not too many. So it's only a marginal percentage of the farming community um, engages in this kind of activities. But otherwise, major people don't even own the farmlands, but they're the ones who grow our food. Most of the people engaged in it live in rural and semi-urban areas of the country. As visible, those people who contribute to the agrarian economy or agricultural production and yielding are they stay in villages and semi-urban areas because those are the places where you still have agricultural land, and this is where our food comes from. All these rural areas are mostly devoid of good transport and communication system. It's almost evident um, if you travel to the interiors of India, to different pockets, smaller pockets of India, especially to villages, you would see that the communication system as well as the road and transport system is still not great, and they've suffered over a period of time, and that's the reason why so much of migration is happening because lack of opportunities, lack of better standard of living. So we have not empowered our rural population, so to say, both in terms of policies and in terms of governmental actions. Though decades after decades, different political parties who came into power uh, tried to do their bit, but that is not enough considering the population that stays in the rural pockets of India. Due to all these factors, despite a high adequate emphasis upon this sector in several of the 5 years plans of the country, our agriculture has been largely lagging behind all other economic sectors over the years because we never gave primacy. Nehru never gave primacy to agriculture. Rather, it was industries and the mills and the factories which were given prominence during Nehru's period and during Mrs. Gandhi's period. This trend continues, and in the last, you know, 7 decades of independence that we have seen, one of the key things that has happened is a shift of economy from agriculture to industry, now technology. And but the point that we don't understand is the less number of people who engage or get involved in this profession, the lesser produce we'll have at the end of the day. Because then at one point in time, it would so happen that we would start importing our food from other countries. Most of them are underprivileged, illiterate, living in not so desirable conditions, normally associated with an uncomfortable living standard. This is the situation all across India, whether you go to Karnataka, you go to Western Maharashtra. There's so many stories that come up about farmers committing suicide across uh, because they are indebted throughout. Uh, Whatever they produce is not enough to pay off the loans, and their loan sharks from whom they take loans, and because they're unable to pay, they commit suicide. And the families live in poverty, and they're constantly ignored by the local politicians, the governments, barely getting any support. So what happens in that sort of situations is they sell off their cattle or the lands they own, if in case they own something, and they all migrate to cities. And this has been a case in the last 30 or 35 odd years across India. Uh, Majority of the farming communities, next generation, are not farming. And that's an alarming situation because we have never empowered our farmers or our food producers those people who offer us food, those people who ensure that we have clothes on our bodies. Um, we barely pay attention to how they are managing with their sustenance. Hence, we need the services of development communication to push the development factor in the agricultural sector as much as possible. And that's one of the primary reasons why Agricom has to come into picture, and Agricom plays a significant role in the sector of developmental economy. So we have agricultural universities, veterinary colleges in almost every state of the country, as well as the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, ICAR, based in Delhi. These institutions, particularly the ICAR, has been spearheading an all-round development and research strategy in this field for the last several decades. If you go to ICAR's website, you would see what kind of programs they have laid out over a period of time, programs they have successfully conducted, for from agricultural communication workshops to bringing in experts from the field to have a discourse and dialogue about farmers' crisis, about the challenges that our agricultural stakeholders or our farmers are facing, and how, as communities, as aware and discerning communities, how individually we can contribute, or how as a collective we can contribute through NGOs or by lending our hand uh, in solidarity or in support of the farming community. There is a lot of research that happens in ICAR, and those research findings or the frameworks are eventually suggested to the upper house, to the politicians or those people who are in the helm of the affairs, people who are going to write policies, people who are going to implement policies. So both in terms of policy advocacy as well as research, ICR has been uh, very significant in the last few decades. Now, these institutions and other related research organizations have been regularly carrying out many high-profile researches into various aspects of agriculture and veterinary studies. For example, researchers in these institutions may be engaged in finding out high-yielding variety seeds for better productivity. Okay, when you do seed studies, you know the difference between high-yielding seed varieties for better productivity and low-yielding um, seeds. So seeds which may grow even in adverse conditions, because there's also a sizable part of the country where there are lesser scope of agricultural production than livestock and poultry, which may yield better and more quantity of milk, meat, but in an organic way. Okay, what has been happening for a period of time is especially the city breeders, because we have less knowledge and we are less keen to know about the kind of food we consume. Um, the middlemen or those people who are running companies, this production sort of companies, what they do is they try to artificially engage in productions, because they have to produce um, food and food related crops in a larger number. So the milk that you consume, the meat that you consume are many times produced artificially. You can go read about it in the internet, and you would have such kind of data or information with you, which might just make you rethink again about the consumption of kind of milk that we consume on an everyday basis, or the meat or the food that is produced for us. So the more organic, the better. But the ironical part is we tend to pay a lot more for organic food than regular food. Uh, that was not the case earlier, because it's the market which is kind of tweaking the situation. They're taking all the produce from the farmers, paying them very marginally, and they're trying to sell us produce at a much higher price, retaining most of the profits. And this has been a situation in the last 2 decades or so, especially after coming in the new millennium. Um, and because we don't try to understand the situations of either the farmers or the farming process, we stay ignorant and we continue to pay the middlemen. The problem is how to make such knowledge and information available to the actual target audience who is expected to be benefited by these research findings. So there are two aspects to it. One is um, taking agricultural information and offering them to non-agricultural stakeholders so that they can participate in larger numbers or contribute in one way or the other. And then the other part is taking the research findings and the frameworks or the information, the knowledge about better productivity, better yield at a lower cost, or every cultural research, every agricultural research findings, which could have a knowledge base. How do we take it to the primary stakeholders, which are the farming community? So we are developing these findings only for the benefits of the farmers engaged in agriculture, especially in remote areas of the country, and this is where the farming activities happen most of the times. So uh, if we have, if we want to empower um, an economy which is agrarian in nature, then we have to make that knowledge and information um, available to the farming community so that they get benefited of that knowledge and they in turn produce better quality food at a relatively cheap consumable cost for all of us. So until and unless they derive any advantage from these findings, what is the utility and justification of achieving these positive results? So our research finding, our research organizations can continue to produce magical results, but it won't work in that sense because we would restricted we would restrict that knowledge base only to the laboratories or only to research conferences, and that knowledge would be oscillating between the experts. It would not reach the people for whom this research was conducted primarily at the first place. So identifying communities and target audience and then helping them with the research findings be the way. Most of the average farmers are usually illiterate, underprivileged, devoid of any proper and effective information for taking up something innovative in their profession. Thus, it is the utmost duty of the society to facilitate transfer of these research findings and knowledge to the farmers. So unless we do that, unless there's a KT that is given to them on consistent basis or periodically, we take the research findings that are done in our labs or in our research centers and offer it to the farmers, it won't help. This will ensure that the latter can take benefits from it by applying this information to their practice. So agricultural practice would have a different grammar or different language, and their process would change, and that could help us to manage a better living standard in due course of time. So it won't happen in 1 year or 2 year. It might take a decade or two, but if unless we get started with the dialogue, unless we start doing that work primarily, then it won't lead to any kind of benefits. So there is an express requirement of having an agricultural communication system for development of the farming community. So agricultural communication system is not just for farmers, it's for non-primary stakeholders like us, who are the consumers as well, that we need to take agricom seriously and see how we facilitate different processes that would help our farming communities yield better, produce better, and allow us to consume better. For the all-round development of agriculture, the communication process also deserves a significant role. Modern farming techniques thus become imperative, in which the person adopts the latest methods of farming based on science for agricultural production. So their knowledge is traditional in nature. They have indigenous knowledge, which is extremely crucial to the land. Where science would come in is all the latest research that has happened in the sector or the research findings that come out of um, long lab-based experiments that happen or field-based experiments that happen from time to time could facilitate or could create modern farming techniques. Modern farming techniques would help in better production, better yielding. So once we offer the latest methods or the latest technology for our farmers and help them understand the scientific process behind it, over a period of time, we might be able to help the farming community uh, in a better way in helping them secure their lives so that they don't end up taking their lives or the family's life, which is what is happening all across India since a long time. So those things be avoided. The question arises from where this new knowledge may be achieved. The first need is that to create the new knowledge, um, constantly looking at the new knowledge system that is available. And then the second need is to send the latest knowledge to farmers. Two part to it. One is the creation of new knowledge or the new techniques, and then offering the technical know-how to the farmers in a way in which they could get benefited. And this is where agricultural extension plays a significant role. Thus, the modern farming key tools are required for modern farming. First is knowledge, second is agricultural extension and information tool, third is the farmers tool. Okay, knowledge will be the knowledge around agricultural sector and all the facilities, latest modern techniques of farming, latest production techniques of farming, all the theoretical knowledge, the field-based knowledge as a framework, and then through extension practices and through all the information tool. Information tool would be all the media devices that we use in order to help facilitate this process. It could be community radio, it could be video documentaries, it could be um, time to time discussions, newsletters, having smaller NGOs who engage in agricultural advocacy and policy advocacy. Um, Places like Deccan Development Society have been doing a fabulous job in community media and food sovereignty. So those kind of organizations can help facilitate that knowledge and take them to the primary stakeholders. And then how then monitoring and seeing to it or supervising how the farmers are utilizing or using the knowledge that was offered to them over a period of time while engaging in the agricultural practices. In the middle part, or the agricultural extension and information tool may be replaced with the latest knowledge um, that cannot reach the farmers, and its result will be an obstacle in the process of farming. So unless you bring in extension practices, unless you use the information tool that is the media, uh, then we won't be able to communicate our ideas, or that knowledge might not be able to be shared. So thus we see that for the modernization of farming, the communication process has a very significant contribution, and communication process through various media can be utilized significantly for the implementation and modernization of farming techniques. What are the scope of agricultural communication? For the information related to agriculture and rural development, there should be regulations for giving more space in newspapers, and government should provide some aid to rural newspapers. A lot of rural newspapers who exclusively devote their spaces for agriculture related news. So some sort of provisions should be made, or there should be given some sort of aid or subsidy to continue or sustain or survive those rural newspapers. And they're extremely crucial because they are in the local language, and will be relatively easy for the village folks to, um, constantly stay updated about the information. Booklets and leaflets should be published in which there should be description of solutions to the problems and working methods. Like we have those gadget booklets that we get when we purchase a new um, equipment for use. Similarly, all the latest tools and technology that is used in agricultural production, there must be um, booklets or leaflets, that a handbook sort of a thing, which carry information about the processes, about the various smaller tools that are used, and how this process happens. So if they encounter any kind of problem related to working methods, there should be some sort of solution or the other that they can go back to. It works as a reference manual. The government should provide television sets and radio sets to the village panchayat centers, something that has been happening but at a very slow pace, so that people who are interested, people who primarily engage in agricultural practices, can watch programs like Rishi Darshan or listen to all the programs that are broadcast in radio related to agriculture, animal husbandry, so on and so forth. From bringing improvement in one-way broadcasting of the Akashvani and Doordarshan, the farmers and women's Charcha Mandals should be organized at each village panchayat center. Okay, what are Charcha Mandals? Charcha Mandals are basically panchayat, um, sabhas or meeting places where people come together to discuss or to share the challenges and issues that they face from time to time, related to farming or agriculture, or if a place is drought prone, or or there are floods that has happened. um, so how do we avoid natural calamities, or how do we recover from natural calamities, or everyday issues that happen over a period of time. So those should be organized, and one-way broadcasting of programs related to agriculture, both in radio as well as in Doordarshan, um, should happen, so that people can gather. It's a collective experience of viewing or listening to those programs, and then having a discussion with either the field experts or those people who have a better know-how of this knowledge that was shared. The programs of rural agricultural development should get much more time on radio and television centers. This has been um, one of the key reasons why Sainath started Pari at the first place, or the organizations like Havarlaria, who primarily are producing stories from the margins. Um, unless we give primacy in our mainstream media to these kind of stories, it would never reach. And agricultural or rural development stories get the least priority in newspapers because they are not fascinating reads, or they are not you know um, they don't have the grit and glamour that that is that rules the media in that sense. Small telefilms of the development should be made, which should be shown at each film theater. So when you go to village theaters, there are still single screen theaters which are there. So there are small telefilms on different developmental agendas or different issues related to agricultural practices could be shared for public understanding. In rural areas, the exhibitions of rural and agricultural development should be organized through fairs and festivals, something that happens in interiors of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, especially Tamil Nadu and Kerala. You see that up north, partly in Punjab. Um, these periodic exhibitions are extremely important through fairs and festivals, because it allows not just to um, for the farming community to come together and share their knowledge system, or acquaint themselves with new techniques, but as outsider, it also allows us or gives us an opportunity to enter into that universe and see how cultural dissemination happens or cultural transaction happens. Um, has been traditional is not necessarily orthodox in nature. There has been so much of indigenous knowledge that has been passed on over a period of time from generation to generations. So we get to get a glimpse of how this universe appears like, or what do people do primarily in that universe. At each district center of farmers exhibitions will be organized regularly once in a year. So these are the scope that broadens agricultural communication as a sector and allows both the primary stakeholders as well as the stakeholders as well as the consumers to engage actively in agricultural production, in agricultural communication, and the support and extension that is required from each other in the sectors to help develop an economy which we are proud of, which had been our tradition, which is the agrarian economy. So that's more or less something that I wanted to share about agricultural communication. From a conceptual overview point of view. So I'll stop here and we can have the question and answer discussion if we have any.